Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Neel, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Let's just jump straight into it. What pulled you from creative and brand work into the wonderful world of fractional CMOing?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with, and thanks for having me on here. To me, it's part of the same world. Creative, I see, as one of the lifebloods of marketing. You need it in every aspect of what you're doing. Visual content, your copy, and then brand. To me, is central to everything. It's not just central to marketing; it's central to a business. And so, I think, depending on where you are in your career, you're going to be interacting with the creative and the brand piece, but it may look different as a fractional CMO as opposed to a designer or a marketing manager. And so for me, from a fractional CMO and a leadership standpoint, you see brand as an asset, a strategic asset. You see creative as an important process and a driver for marketing. So it's evolved, but to me, it's all linked.
So what problem do you solve right now as a fractional CMO, right? And how do you make sure that you can solve it for different people at the same time?
Yeah, marketing looks different for each client and
Yes.
each company, but a lot of the challenges are quite similar. So we tend to mature and scale marketing, and we do it in a way that it's foundational, so it's scalable for the long term.
Yeah.
And we also do it in a way that we tie it to business growth and revenue, right? And this is where a lot of the challenges that we see arise. CEOs get frustrated with their marketing teams because they feel like it's severed or disconnected from sales, or it's a black box. They don't know what's happening, or it's not strategic enough. It's not driving some of the big things like fundraising or go to market. So that's typically where we jump in and help.
So who do you solve that problem for right now?
Yeah, it's the CEOs tend to be our ICP, founders as well. Depending on the size of the company, sometimes there's multiple stakeholders, but it's typically on the leadership level. The change and transformation we're trying to make is systemic and it's foundational. So it typically involves the leadership team.
Okay. Awesome. So now that we have a bit of context, can you break down for me why you think there is so oftentimes this disconnect between marketing and sales? And how do you go about solving it, especially so I saw that you mentioned it, like founder-led sales. At the end of the day, most CEOs, they will be the marketing department, the sales department, and they will also be the, delivery departments. So why is there this disconnect? In what environment does this happen, and how do you fix it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with defining the role of marketing within the organization. Because again, it's amorphous. It looks different, B2B versus B2C, downstream versus upstream, product versus service. So it looks very different in each organization. So I think there's a misunderstanding on what marketing should be doing for the organization. It's not just creating content and going viral on TikTok. What is the role of it? So I think if this isn't defined, and I think if the need for marketing is very surface level, like we need marketing to grow our revenue or whatever, if you just kind of leave it at that level, I think that's where all the disconnection happens. I think it needs to be defined on a fundamental operational level. What is the role of marketing in your organization? If you're B2B sales, well, typically marketing is sales enablement and does ABM and it supports the salespeople while also managing brand. If it's CPG, if it's e-commerce, you're leading with brand and packaging and product. So I think that's where a lot of the issues arise. There's a misunderstanding of what marketing is supposed to be doing in the organization. And sometimes it's the fault of marketing, and sometimes it's the fault of the CEO, sometimes it's the fault of the salesperson. it's usually a bit of everybody, and there's a little bit of a disconnect there.
So I like that. And I think for the B2B coaches and consultants listening to us, this is going to be super relevant. So obviously there's going to be multiple layers, right? First, you need to understand, so who's your target clients, right? Who's your ICP? And then the first layer would be top of funnel. How do you go from stranger to they are aware of you? They are potentially problem aware and they are starting to get solution aware, but that's the top of the funnel and they know you. Then they start getting interested in you and they look into you and they potentially become a lead. And then they get into a call with you. And then end of the funnel, they are becoming a client. So if we look at all these like step by step, layer by layer, how do you first fix the top of the funnel? Like, how do you make sure you have a message that lands, that you get in front of the right people, that those right people are like, interesting, rather than just scrolling through because you got viral on TikTok, but that's just a dance that you did that has nothing to do with your business. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I think you nailed it with the ICP. Now, people think ideal customer profile, it's a static, persona document. I think you got to spend a lot of effort interviewing your ICPs, understanding their behaviors, understanding their motives, because typically in B2B, whether you're providing a service or like say a CRM or a product, they need to look good within their organization, right? If they're going to be spending 6-7 figures with you, they need to get buy-in from their peers, maybe their boss. There's a budgetary cycle that typically happens in B2B. So, and then also understanding their market, right? So what are the headwinds and tailwinds that they're dealing with that affect their budgets, that affect their buying decisions? If you don't know these things, or if you're kind of guessing, then a lot of your marketing might be mistargeted, right? So when you really understand that, it helps you hone in and position better with your category, with your differentiator, with your pricing. And in addition to that, like if we the B2B funnel, we as marketers, we love designing this aware intent kind of conversion funnel, but in reality, it's very messy, right? They will do their own research. So you want to be where they do the research. They're going to talk to your customers. And then when the decision time comes, it's a really messy back and forth with the technical buyer, the financial buyer, the CEO, the board. So how are you equipped for that? And one more thing I'd add in B2B, people are buying trust. So putting your capabilities, your skillful people and their knowledge up front is going to be very important for differentiation, but also for trust validation.
I love this. There are so many things to follow up on. So you broke down how to get the right people to be aware of you. How, and maybe to take the example of Tropoly, right? How do you get in the room with the right decision makers? You mentioned the technical buyers, the financial buyers, the decision makers. I mean, you're basically trying to get a hold of the CEO, which is usually not the least busy person in the company. So how do you make sure to get in the room with the right decision maker in front of you so that you can actually provide value and potentially sign them as a client?
Yeah, you need to, as part of your discovery process, you need to know who's actually making the decision and who's the budget holder, and that should be one of your first questions. And so you might have your champion that has reached out to you. They're going to champion your product or solution within the organization, but they're not the end decision maker. So one of the first things you want to ask in the qualification: are you qualified to sign off on this? If not, who is? Because then you continue on that path and that conversation and the pitch with that person in mind. And now you want to get enough information on their role. Like, is it the CRO that's signing off versus a CFO? Because that's going to influence the materials that you're going to provide and how you're structuring your pitch. And for a CFO, ROI is very important. Budget savings is very important, optimization. So how are you presenting these things to your champion so that they can then communicate that to, the CFO, who can then join the next call, right? And so I think you got to do a lot of info gathering. You gotta have those conversations up front to see who is the decision making person or committee at sometimes, and then you're gonna have to kind of gear your message and your pitch to your champion so they can relay that internally effectively.
I love that. Okay, so we know how to get in front of people, get them slowly down our sales funnel, and get into the room with the right people. How do you transform that into an engagement? And I think this is particularly interesting because as a fractional CMO, you're going to have to, get the buy-in of the CEO, obviously, but you're going to sit right next to them, right? So how do you conduct a sales process to be like, hey, here is enough value up front? That's what most consultants struggle with anyways, right? You need authority. You need to be considered as the subject matter experts. The only way to do this nowadays, in my opinion, is to build trust and provide value beforehand, being very educational, and then being like, and here is everything else we can do if, you start paying me for my time. How do you close that gap, Neel? Like, how do you go from, hey, we had some chats, that's nice. I run the discovery call properly. I understand who the decision makers are. Here is my proposition to SOW, letter of engagement, let's rock and roll. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. A lot of our clients, it's actually a little bit earlier in the process. One of our first meetings is getting them on a whiteboard, and we've done it, virtually. I've done it in person. Look at it as the tip of the spear, because at that point you're helping them navigate through their challenges, and you pinpoint where you can provide the solutions, and you're giving value during that conversation in a discovery period, but they're also getting a chance to see how you think and how you structure, your approaches, how you provide analysis, how creative you are. And so you actually can put your best foot forward, and it's going to be a little bit of a cost to you up front, but it's a much higher close rate when they can see you work in real time and engaging with them in real time. Conversely, you can also see if it's a fit for you, right? The person's completely micromanaging you through that process, and they're not allowing you to run it, then maybe they're not a good fit for you too. So it's got to work both ways, right?
So I like that a lot. So what you're suggesting is actually start doing the work. Like, show them, hey guys, I'm not going to just tell you what it is to work with me. I'm going to do it with you together right now. And you start working on solving problem as if you were in a consulting session or in your fractional CMO role. They get value from it. They understand how you work, if that's what vibes with them, but you also make sure that this is a fit for you, which makes a lot of sense.
Well, an example, one of my past clients is a cybersecurity B2B solutions firm. And they actually, that was one of the things we packaged and marketed was these free brainstorm sessions. There's no cost to the client. It was more cost to the firm. The firm was a little bit larger, so they could afford flying their experts out. And they had a very in-depth structured approach, which would last an hour or two. And then out of that whiteboard session, they would pinpoint all of the challenges and which they can help with. And they would put that into a deck, and a follow-up would go to the client. And then they'd have another version of that would go to the sales team. That would show, here's, what to look for in the next steps, right? So it was a beautiful way to really look under the hood. But at the same time, the value the client, the prospect got out of that was clarity and like trust, right? So it's an example. I know it's cost up front. You're not going to make any money off of that, but your conversion rate's going to go a lot higher.
It's always the same thing, right? It's, oh, but my cost of acquiring a customer is going up, and like my ROAS is going down if you do some ads. But at the end of the day, I'd rather pay $1,000 or $10,000 for a lead if that engagement afterwards ends up to be a 10x that, 100x that. You need to put in the work. You need to actually show the value first, if you can afford it, obviously. Otherwise, you can find ways of doing it. You mentioned remotely, right? You can do a whiteboard session remotely. That works as well. Engagement in person is always better because you get to do the before and after coffee or dinner. But like, taking the time to establish that trust, establish that authority directly with the person is so, so important. One of the
Absolutely.
things the partner taught me when I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers was like there are two types of consultants. First type is the hunters, and the second type is the farmers. And he was like, Guillaume, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. Like, I love to go after new business. But the partners actually making the most money are the farmers, the one able to take an initial engagement and provide so much value and lay down a roadmap that is a multi-layered, multi-year project that fits the whole organization, not just our team, are the ones who go the fastest because this is where the money is. I'm interested to getting your take on this, Neel, which is it the same in the fractional CXO world? Like, do you see engagements the same way? Are you doing everything you can to retain a client and transform it into multiple engagements over multiple years? Or would you rather go for different clients? How does this work?
Yeah, I think with fractional work, you're at a vantage point where you could kind of set the foundation for future projects and engagements. Like our work at Tropoly, we do navigate between advisory, consulting, and fractional. It just depends on the needs of the client. Um, but when you've stepped in as a fractional CXO, CMO, CRO, whatever, one of the first things I do is I lay in a 30, 60, 90 as if I was hired by the firm, right? Like an executive coming in. What are you doing in the next 3 months? As part of that is the strategic kind of build out, the oversight. Like what are some of the benchmarks you already have that we can optimize and improve? And what are some of the benchmarks you haven't tried? Let's put those in. Let's get some KPIs in that tie into revenue and sales, so that we can report on those to finance. And then managing the expectation that some of this is experimental and some of it is optimization. But then when you have that vantage point as a fractional or as a leader, you have the ability and the purview to see long term, and then you can see based on the budget that gets put into place how that's going to expand. Now, in my case, I've brought in other team members over time to execute once we've kind of laid the foundation, which increased our ticket price with with the client. Other times I've brought in third parties that aren't in my firm because they were just better suited to execute. But again, I think if you have that fractional executive oversight, you can then set budgets, you can set the long-term vision. You also want to have quick wins, right? Because you want to provide value as well. So you kind of balance the short term with the long term there.
Again, lots of golden nuggets in there that I'm gonna try to follow up on. So being able to capture the before and after picture of an engagement with a client is key for two reasons. The first one is you're going to be able to showcase results to your clients, right? Which is like, hey, we started 12 months ago, which is a long time ago. This is where you were, facts, and this is where we are now. See progress? Let's work further together to go even to the next level. But what's great in this is once you have the buy-in of the client, you can also use this as a case study, which a lot of B2B coaches and consultants struggle with because as a company, you don't always want to advertise the fact that you've hired a consultant for a specific task, right? Because you'd rather keep it in-house. So how do you do this, Neel? Like, how do you, with your company, right, with Tropoly, showcase real transformation, leverage that to showcase your work, proof of your work, right? If we look at your bio, we see many, many accomplishments. How do you make all this work and what consultants can learn from it?
Yeah, you wanna be able to, well, for sure, you want to get your client approval before using their name or brand.
It's better. It
So,
works better that
so
way.
yeah, because some of our case studies are anonymized for that reason. Either we haven't asked them or we just kind of haven't got a response.
Yeah.
So, but what I do is in a closed environment, we show a lot more detail.
Mhm.
We did some very large rebrands over the last few years, and there's easy to show before and after. Here's a new identity. Here's the new messaging and positioning, but it doesn't really show the work that goes beyond it. So we could use those to kind of demonstrate we have that skill. But once we have them on a call, showing them how we did the research and how we structured it, and then how we did the competitive analysis, and how we did the messaging analysis, and the process we went with the leadership teams to kind of pick the naming style. And those things are very difficult to show in a case study. For one, it's very in depth, so a client might not be keen on you putting that on your website. But in a discussion, this is why I always say I can always go deeper when I've reached out to a client, or we've been in discussion. Let's just get on a call, because I can show you under the hood how we really think. To me, that rounds out the case study, because they can still share your case studies internally, but now they are equipped to see how you actually think and how you actually built the processes behind the case study. And I think those are very valuable, because then they can visualize and see how they're going to work with you through some of these processes, right? So yeah, it can be a challenge if you can't use the brand name, so you can anonymize it, which is very common. But I think having as part of your pitch, making sure you have some materials that really synthesizes the thinking and the research and the groundwork that went behind it, so that you can present that on a closed call or in person.
Love this. So, well, doing a quick snapshot of everything that is in place when you arrive, right? So you have a clear understanding of like where we are starting from anyways is super important. What we like to do and what we help our clients implement is making it part of the deliverables. Namely, you're gonna capture as milestones, right? Results along the journey. And you're going to have calls with those people, ideally recorded calls, where you're gonna ask, hey, this is where we started, this is where we are now. What's your feedback? What are your thoughts? And they're gonna explain how they feel about the results right now.
Yeah.
At the end of the engagement, what you can do is take all those recordings, do a little, mixing of it, and submit it to the client. Like, hey, look, we got results for you. Hopefully you're happy with it. Are you happy? Cool, you're happy. I'd love to help more people like you. I've taken some of our conversations. I've removed all the metrics and names and like things that could be critical. I'd love a testimonial from you, and I've actually already done the work.
Yeah.
Here is a little 1 minute, 2 minute snippet based on our conversations and feedback you gave me that I think could be good as a testimonial. Does that vibe with you? Past that point of getting the approvals on sensitive data, which is obviously a crux, it's also a lot about friction, right? If you do it frictionless, if you make it super easy for people to give you a testimonial by already leveraging things and conversations you've had, this is where you can unlock real testimonials, and you get people to walk through the journey, which is even more effective.
Yeah, it's like another marketing tactic.
Exactly, it is. But it
Yeah.
takes to do it deliberately, right? To do
Yes.
it deliberately during the engagement, and you make your work part of your marketing, which is anyways the best way to make it work, because this is a window into how you work and how you get results for people.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's going to be interesting to get your take on this, Neel, because I ask mainly B2B coaches and consultants. I'm interested to getting your take on this as a fractional CMO. Where do you find yourself the most stuck right now? The reason I'm asking this question is we have people listening to us right now or during the episode once it's live, who might be stuck at exactly the same point. And I think it's super interesting to learn from your peers where they're stuck, potentially at the same place as you, and how they think about that problem and how they think of working around it. So where do you feel the most stuck right now as a fractional CMO?
So when you mean stuck, is it like kind of stuck from growth, or is it just, I guess, some of my biggest challenges?
Yeah, so challenges, something that, is going to, once you crack that nut, I think is the English expression, is going to enable the next level for growth. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, I don't know if we call this a challenge, but a lot of our work comes from our network, right? Like and I think a lot of consultants are going to be like, yeah, me too. All right. So, 25-ish years in market, I've built a big network. My partners have a massive network. So we have that as a luxury. We've done the work through our career to go for those coffees, go to those events, meet people, really engage with them. And over time, that pays off, right? And so we've tapped into our network, and we continue to do that. Now, that could be, it's incredible that we get business that way, but it can be a challenge. In certain markets, you start getting into the feast and famine cycle, right? Because you get a bunch of work, get a lot of revenue, and then all of a sudden it kind of dries up, and now you're kind of scrapping to get that next cycle of work. So we've made efforts to smooth that out a little bit, right? And so what do we do in between? I'm got myself out of the shadows this last year, doing more podcasts like this, posting a lot more on LinkedIn, speaking much more speaking engagements. Say with my partners, they're getting out there a lot more, which is now smoothing out that pipeline. It's getting more awareness. And so some of our conversions have gotten quicker, and the sales cycle is shortened. Some of them are much longer, but they're coming back to us months and months later and saying, okay, we're ready now. So that has helped a lot, but that is a challenge. Been a entrepreneur for a long time, and even when I was junior, many years ago, doing design and branding work, I went through the same thing, right? The feast and famine stuff. I think a lot of consultants empathize with that. So you got to find a way to keep that button pressed when you're doing well and you're feasting. Carve out some of that revenue and put it towards marketing to keep that button pressed. Don't get lazy. I know it's not lazy because everyone's busy doing the work, but you got to find time. You got to prioritize that and keep pushing through.
So thanks a lot for sharing this, Neel. I think this is so spot on. And so for me, a B2B coach or consultant who's getting deals from their network and from referrals is normal, and it means they are doing a good job. When you do a good job as a B2B coach, as a consultant, I suspect it's pretty similar for fractional CXOs. You just get more business because people talk about you. Now, that's great because that allows you to grow steadily your business. You've worked a lot on your network. I think that's super valuable. A lot of B2B coaches and consultants will do this anyways, but I think that's good advice. Like, take the time to go to the conferences, go and drink those coffees, meet people in your niche or parallel industries that will help you, pull you in for certain engagements because you have the expertise that they lack. When you think about acquisition channel, which one are you considering going after then? Like, what's going to be the acquisition channel that you think is the most relevant as a fractional CMO?
I think events have done well for us. And it is here in Vancouver. It's we attend a lot of events. We've also thrown a few of our own, and we're going to continue to do that. So that's been a good channel for us. Now, again, a lot of effort. You gotta, we go there in person, network, but trying to also, we're evolving that by, aligning with the organizers and providing workshops at events, speaking engagements. So really trying to get on the other side of that, has been helpful as well. So right now that is one of our best lead generators. And now we are, building our own systems to market around those digitally, right? Whether we do some boosted content, some of our own, thought leadership, to surround that and envelope some of those events. But that's typically where we're getting, most of our leads, and also through like I mentioned, through our network, is reactivating those networks. It's just having conversations, meeting them, reminding them.
Love that. That does make a lot of sense. So professionally, and I guess personally as well, you sit kind of at the intersection, right, of go-to-market, capital market readiness. Where do you see the biggest growth opportunities? Like, is it AI? Is it category design? Is it storytelling for investors and customer alike? Like, in your niche, if you had to advise your clients right now as a fractional CMO, what's the next big thing for your market? Talk like next 6 months.
Right. So there's a few things that don't change in marketing. And those are the first principles of why you're doing marketing and how your foundations are set up. Your ICP, your positioning, your brand, your pulse on headwinds and tailwinds, the way you've designed your funnel. These things typically if there's a crack in your marketing, it's somewhere there, right? Your data strategy, your KPIs, how you're connected to the rest of the business. Like I mentioned earlier, your identity as a marketing function and department. So I always go back to these things because that's typically where the cracks in the foundations are. Now, I think everyone needs to dial in on those. Now, going forward, everyone's, of course, we're in the age of AI, incredible technology. Learning to harness it so you can augment your activities, I think, is just going to get more and more important. How do you implement it into your processes? How do you leverage it? Now, I've been very vocal on ensuring the output isn't slop. You still have the expertise in-house. You have the storytellers, you have the positioning people that, they should still have purview over all of the activities that go out, but you can use these tools to make it a little bit more optimized and scalable. I always say, just remember there's another human on the other end of your output. We don't want more slop. We don't want more noise. We got a lot of that already. So differentiation cut through that noise is still one of the most important things in marketing today. And that's going to last as long as marketing is a thing. Next 6 months, really understanding and prioritizing some of these tools that are coming out. Some of them are incredible. But use them for what they are. They're not replacing the human aspect. Everybody says this, but we're seeing a lot of junk out there. So don't add to the junk, right? Really know your core principles, really know your differentiation, and then learn these tools. Become very good at them. Become AI enabled. It's incredible tools, but learn to use them into your processes and into how you work.
To that, Neel, ladies and gentlemen. Neel, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, where should they go?
I'm active on LinkedIn, so Neel Singh, NeelSingh. You can go to our website, tropoly.io, tropoly.io, and you can send me a message on either.
We'll put all the links in the description, and you've just earned at least one connection from this on LinkedIn. Adding you right now, Neel. Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thank you, Guillaume.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.